So I'm moving on to quilting the blocks in the table runner, and I think what I'm going to do is use my rulers to do some crosses, just stitching the cross diagonal of each of the cream colored rectangles. I'll just do some meandering in the blue sections of the block, and then maybe I'll use one of my curved rulers to stitch just a curve around the edges of the triangle. By doing the meandering in the blue, it makes it easy to go from point to point in the block, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So I think what I'll first do is stitch the diagonal line. So I just have to bring up my bobbin thread and do a few stitches to start. Now, when you're using a ruler, you have to make sure, especially with a long arm machine or your home machine, you have to make sure that the ruler is thick enough that it won't slide underneath the foot of your machine. You don't want that to happen because you will break your needle, you might break your ruler, you might have a piece of plexiglass go flying. So you want to make sure that you're using rulers that are specifically made for using on a sewing machine and not for cutting fabric. Those are different rulers. So now that I've got my thread pulled up, I'm going to just hold my ruler in place, and my gamel has a round foot, which is nice because I can put the ruler at any side of the foot, and it's always going to be the same distance away from the needle, so it's about 1/4 of an inch, which makes it handy. So what I'm going to do is hold my ruler in place, and I'm going to stitch along that edge of the ruler just by pushing my foot against the ruler and using it as a guide. So I've got my first line stitched, you can see. Then I'm going to do a little bit of a meandering stitch in here. And that gets me up to this point so that I can do my stitch, my line across this way. So there, hopefully you can see that I've got the X across here. Now I'm going to do a little meandering in here. And that'll get me up to this point where I can do some meandering in this section, and then I'll be able to do my curve back here. It's always important when you're using rulers or when you're doing any quilting design to figure out how you're going to get from section to section, because you don't want to get yourself stuck in a corner. You can always break off your thread and start somewhere new, but it takes more time to be breaking the threads all the time and then switching from place to place. It's always nice if you can kind of figure out ahead of time how you're going to get from this section to this section and then over to here, and then from here I'm going to use my curved ruler and I'm going to stitch right along that edge. So here's this ruler, same idea, it's nice and thick so it's not going to go underneath my foot, and I just hold it in place and stitch. And this curve isn't going to be that big because of the size of the ruler. And then I'm going to do back here, get back to where I started. So now that I'm back here, I can do my meandering back here, do my cross, and I'll get all the way around. Hopefully, well, I guess I'll end up at one corner and then I'll be able to do the meandering in these two sections and that block will be finished. So here's my finished block, And you can see I've gone all the way around. I did the crosses in the two rectangles. I've got the curves in these two triangles, and all of the blue in the block is done with the little meandering stitch. Now on to the other two blocks.